You remember your fifth birthday party perfectly. The cake, the balloons, the exact moment you blew out the candles. It feels solid, complete, undeniably yours, the kind of memory you'd never think to question. But here's the uncomfortable possibility. That memory might not be a recording of what happened. It might be something your brain built, quietly, sometime after the fact, and handed to you as if it had always been there, indistinguishable from the real thing. That sounds impossible. Memories feel like the most personal thing you own. So, what if a huge amount of what you remember was never actually stored the way you think it was? Here's what's actually happening inside your skull when you remember. Neuroscientists studying the hippocampus, the brain structure central to forming and retrieving memories, have found that recalling an event activates many of the same neural regions that were active during the original experience, but not identically. It's less like replaying a video file and more like an actor reconstructing a scene from a script that keeps getting quietly rewritten between performances. The broad strokes stay recognizable. The specific details drift. This is why two siblings can argue for years about what really happened at a family dinner decades ago, both completely convinced they're right, both genuinely unable to understand how the other person could remember it so differently. Neither one is lying. Both of their brains did exactly what brains are built to do, which is reconstruct rather than replay. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus has spent decades studying exactly this question, and her findings unsettled an entire field. In one of her most famous studies, she showed that simply describing a fake childhood event to adults in enough convincing detail could cause a real percentage of them to develop full, vivid memories of an event that never happened, not vague impressions. Full scenes with sensory details that felt completely real to the people experiencing them, indistinguishable from memories of things that had genuinely occurred. Think about what that means for a second. If a memory can be manufactured from nothing but suggestion, how much of what feels certain in your own past is actually reconstruction rather than recall? And it isn't only rare or unusual cases either. Follow-up studies replicating this kind of implanted memory research have found the effect holds up across different cultures, ages, and types of suggested events, from minor childhood mishaps to entirely fabricated encounters with strangers. The mind's willingness to accept a well-told suggestion as its own experience isn't a rare glitch. It's a stable, repeatable feature of how memory works. Here's the deeper mechanism behind this. Your brain doesn't store memories the way a video camera stores footage, capturing every frame in fixed permanent order. Neuroscientist Karim Nader's research on memory reconsolidation revealed something that changed how scientists think about remembering itself. Every time you recall a memory, your brain doesn't simply play it back. It actually pulls the memory out of storage, leaves it briefly unstable, and then restores it, slightly altered by whatever you're feeling or thinking in that exact moment of recall. That means remembering isn't retrieval. It's closer to editing, a live process rather than a static one, happening every single time you reach back for something you thought was permanently settled. Each time you tell the story of your fifth birthday, you're not accessing the original file. You're accessing the last version you told, and then quietly updating it again before putting it back. Small details shift. Emotional tone bleeds in. A detail from a photograph you saw years later might slip in as if it had always been there. There's another layer to this worth sitting with. Most people can't remember anything from before roughly age 3 or 4, a phenomenon researchers call infantile amnesia. The hippocampus is still developing during those early years, and it simply isn't equipped yet to form the kind of long-term, retrievable memories adults rely on. Yet plenty of people insist they remember being 2 years old, describing a crib, a specific toy, a parent's face leaning over them. Developmental psychologists studying this exact phenomenon have found that many of these memories are actually built later, stitched together from photographs, family stories told at holidays, and home videos watched on repeat until the reconstructed scene feels every bit as real as something actually witnessed. The brain doesn't flag these as secondhand. It files them as lived experience, indistinguishable from the inside from a memory formed by your own eyes. So why would a brain evolve to work this way? Wouldn't perfect, unchanging memory be more useful for survival? Not necessarily. Psychologist Marcia Johnson, known for her work on source monitoring, the process by which your brain tries to figure out where a piece of information actually came from, whether it was seen, heard, imagined, or simply inferred, found that people constantly confuse memories from different sources without realizing it. A story someone told you gets remembered as something you witnessed yourself. A dream gets remembered as a real event. A scene from a movie gets stitched quietly into a childhood recollection. Your brain isn't trying to deceive you. It's trying to be efficient, and efficiency sometimes means blending details together rather than keeping perfect, separate records of everything you've ever experienced. Here's where evolution comes back into the picture. A brain that stored every memory with perfect, rigid accuracy would be enormously expensive to run, and worse, it would be inflexible. Your ancestors didn't need a flawless archive of the past. They needed a usable summary, one that could be updated as new information came in, so lessons learned yesterday could sharpen decisions made tomorrow. A memory that updates itself based on new context isn't a bug. It's a feature that let early humans revise their understanding of danger, of allies, of territory, without being trapped by an outdated version of events. But that same flexibility creates a strange side effect in you, right now, in the modern world. Eyewitness testimony researchers have documented case after case where confident, detailed, emotionally sincere witnesses described events that later evidence proved could not have happened the way they remembered. These weren't liars. Brain scans and behavioral studies suggest the memory itself had been altered somewhere between the event and the retelling, and the person genuinely believed what they were saying. Confidence and accuracy, it turns out, are almost entirely unrelated. There's a social version of this same effect too. Researchers studying what's sometimes called memory conformity have found that simply hearing another person describe a shared event, even briefly, can shift what you remember about it, pulling your version toward theirs without either of you noticing the influence. Two people who lived through the exact same event can walk away, compare notes once, and both leave that conversation with memories that are now slightly more alike than they were an hour earlier. Memory, it turns out, isn't purely private. It's porous, picking up traces of the people around you every time it gets discussed out loud. That's a strange thing to sit with. The feeling of certainty you get when you remember something tells you almost nothing about whether it actually happened that way. So how does a memory actually change? Without you noticing, quietly, one small detail at a time, until the final version bears only a loose resemblance to what actually happened. The misinformation effect, another concept Loftus helped establish, shows that even subtle wording can reshape what people remember. In one experiment, simply asking people how fast two cars were going when they smashed into each other, instead of when they hit each other, caused people to later remember broken glass at the scene that was never actually there. One word altered a memory that felt completely firsthand. If a single word can insert broken glass into your memory of an accident you witnessed with your own eyes, what has slowly crept into the memories you've replayed hundreds of times over the years? Here's where it gets even stranger. The memories you revisit most often, the ones that feel the most vivid and certain, may actually be the least reliable of all. Every retelling is another opportunity for reconsolidation to quietly reshape the details. A memory you've told 50 times isn't 50 confirmations of the same fixed event. It's 50 separate edits, layered one on top of another, until the final version may share only a loose resemblance to what actually happened. Meanwhile, a memory you never think about, one you haven't touched in 20 years, might actually be closer to the original, simply because it was never given the chance to be rewritten. It's sat quietly in storage, untouched, spared from the small distortions that accumulate every time a memory gets pulled out, handled, and put back. That means the memories that feel the least certain to you might sometimes be the most accurate, and the ones you'd swear on might be the most edited. So what does this mean for the story you tell about your own life, the version you've repeated so many times it no longer feels like a story at all? Just plain fact? It means the version of you sitting here right now isn't built from a perfect archive of everything that happened. It's built from a living, constantly revised narrative, One that has been reshaped by every conversation, every photograph, every retelling, every emotional state you were in each time you looked back. The past isn't fixed behind you the way it feels. It's still being written, quietly, every time you remember it. Psychologists who study personal narrative and identity have argued that this constant editing isn't a flaw in the system at all. It's closer to the entire point. The self you experience as continuous, the feeling that you are the same person who existed 10 years ago, 20 years ago, doesn't come from an unbroken chain of perfectly preserved memories. It comes from a story your brain keeps actively maintaining, smoothing over gaps, resolving contradictions, and updating the meaning of old events in light of who you've since become. This isn't necessarily something to fear. Researchers studying memory reconsolidation have suggested that this same flexibility is what allows people to heal from painful experiences over time, gradually reframing old memories with new understanding and less intensity. If memory were truly fixed and unchangeable, trauma would never soften, old grudges would never fade, and old joys would never grow warmer with distance. The same mechanism that makes memory unreliable is the mechanism that makes memory livable. Some clinical researchers have gone further, exploring whether the brief window of instability that follows recall the moment a memory is pulled out and left temporarily editable before being restored might eventually be used therapeutically to help people gently update memories that have been keeping them stuck. The same quirk that makes eyewitnesses unreliable in a courtroom may turn out to be one of the more hopeful discoveries in the science of healing. So the next time you feel completely certain about something from your past, what would it mean to hold that certainty a little more loosely, not to distrust everything you remember, just to recognize that the feeling of certainty and the fact of accuracy are two very different things, running on two very different systems. Your memory was never built to be a courtroom record. It was built to be useful, adaptable, and quietly editable, shaped by every year that's passed since the moment actually happened. That 5th birthday party, the cake, the candles, the exact moment you blew them out. Some of it is almost certainly true. Some of it, quietly, without your permission or your knowledge, may have been rewritten a dozen times by the very brain that insists it's showing you exactly what happened. And the strange part is, you'll never be able to tell which parts, because from the inside, an edited memory and an original one feel exactly the same, equally vivid, equally certain, equally yours.